Blockchain policy in Texas. Welcome back to the stage, Lee Bratcher. Welcome to the stage, Texas Senator Angela Paxton. Texas House of Representatives representing District 98, Gio Capriglione. Small business owner serving District 136 in the Texas House of Representatives, John Busey III. Lawyer and Texas Senator Royce West, District 23.
Well, we are coming to the end of an amazing 2 days, and we have the all-star team here from the Texas legislature to talk about what's coming up in Texas. How is Texas maintaining its position as a global leader in Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital assets? So I'm excited to have this conversation with you guys. I thought for a second about just taking this very philosophical, but instead we're going to just do brass tacks policy. So what is the, and Senator Paxton, let's start with you because you're directly to my right. What is the, from the last session, what is the thing that most excited you that we were able to get done in the blockchain policy space?
Well, I mean, I think that it was exciting to put together the work group for the blockchain matters, which the report just came out, and we've heard some of the testimony. In fact, yesterday, even in the interim hearing in Business and Commerce, we got to hear from some of the folks on the Blockchain Matters work group. But I think that was one of the most important things that we were able to do, just because it's so important. The footprint that we already have with blockchain in Texas, being Texas, you know, we don't want to follow some other states' policy on blockchain. We want to be the ones at the front of shaping that and what that is going to look like going forward for 29 million Texans.
Agreed. And now looking to the future, I'll jump to Representative Capriglione, and then we'll go down the line. This next session, what most excites you as far as your legislative priorities about making Texas and ensuring Texas remains a dynamic and innovative state?
Sure. Me? All right.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, for me, I think it starts off with where Angela left off. Is we have this report now from the council, which gives us a lot of great ideas that have been at least vetted a bit about what we should be looking at in the next session. Last session, we worked on the Uniform Commercial Code. We have the report. But one of the things that we did, and along with Representative Busey, we went and started to educate legislators about blockchain, about Bitcoin, about all of these things, because you may be surprised to know that some politicians don't really know a lot about this subject. And so for us, that was a big part of it. Going forward, we're going to look at things like flaring, you know, how we can use maybe tax incentives to help not only increase economic development for Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining here in Texas, but also maybe in terms of how to help on our grid stability.
Mm-hmm. And Representative Busey, same question to you.
No, and I want to add to what Chairman Capriglione said. He has been leading the charge to have an IT caucus for the legislature. We do not know enough, and it's important if we're going to pass laws and have oversight and regulation that we learn more and we learn from industry leaders. And so that's what we've been doing. And we've traveled the state, had guest speakers, and we're trying to make sure we can do a better job with making sure Texas is a leader and at the forefront, and that we don't get too far in the way so we can continue to be that leader. I think one thing we need to look at, and we've got the report, and I think we'll talk more about that, but how, as a state, that we are a leader and an innovator, do we make sure that we also have the right education pathways for our kids, so it's also Texans being hired to work at these jobs that are now coming to Texas, and that we're not just having to look at a state. And so that's working with our high schools and our community colleges and our colleges for better preparation and pathways and an investment in our schools and in computer science especially. So we're creating the workforce that can go into this industry as well.
I'm glad you brought up workforce because, you know, Senator West has been a proponent of education for a long time. We just spoke with the chancellor of Dallas Colleges backstage, who you've known for many years, and you were influential in University of North Texas campus there in Dallas, their Dallas campus. I know that was kind of your brainchild. Where do you see education going, both at the community college level and at the four-year universities, as far as, you know, STEM, but also there's this gray collar thing that's like, it's a mix of blue collar and white collar. It's you got to be a little bit physical to work in a Bitcoin mine, but you also have to take apart a very complex machine. So that's why I blend them together. So do you see universities like Dallas College and University of North Texas in Dallas getting involved in that kind of stuff?
Absolutely, and I think Representative Busey is correct. When we begin to think about the workforce of the future, this is a great area that we obviously need to invest in to make certain we have that workforce. And to the extent that it's blue collar, then we need to figure out whether there are any certifications that would be necessary. And I'm glad to see that Justin was here from Dallas College, the largest college in the state of Texas, being one of your speakers today. And we need to make certain that not only Dallas College, but all other community colleges, to the extent that the subject area is relevant to what they normally teach, that we do that. You know, some of the recommendations talked about public-private partnerships. We need to make certain that our universities partner with the industry. I'll tell you this, and I've been practicing, I was going to say practicing law, but I've been a senator now for 30 years. The currency that you have in the legislature are good ideas, or ideas, I put it like that. And needless to say, the work group came up with some great ideas that I know that will have bipartisan support as we move through the legislative process.
But it was a little too long, though, wasn't the report? It was quite lengthy.
Well, I mean, you can dig into those different subject areas and stuff, and so there's a little bit in there for everyone. And so we'll decide exactly which ones kind of permeate to the top and get serious consideration.
Well, let's do exactly that. Let's dig into the report. And again, let's just go down the line with your favorite idea, maybe like a recommendation that sparked something that you would love to pick up and run with it. So from the report, and Senator Paxton, we'll go down the line. Each person is just the most unique thing or your favorite thing that came out of the report.
I think for me, it's, with the Uniform Commercial Code, the idea that that digital assets are your personal property. I think that's really, really important.
I love that. Succinct and to the point. Yes, sir.
Well, if you think the report was long, wait till you hear my answer, because I think there's a lot of cool things, but I think we do need to talk a little bit about philosophy. I'm sure maybe that report was written a week late, right? I mean, because there's a lot of things obviously going on that we want to talk about that we're going to have to go and discuss during the legislative session, especially when it comes to the government and getting involved in regulations. But I think the one thing, I was going to say one thing in particular that struck me and that I'm worried about is this idea of some sort of Federal Reserve currency banked coin, which if you Google me, you'll know I'm not the biggest fan of the Federal Reserve. And I definitely don't think that they should be driving either our technology or our policy or our massive trade balance and stuff. But for me, just really quickly, so I was taking an Uber yesterday, and just so happened that the guy that was driving my vehicle, he's Venezuelan, or he was Venezuelan. And so we started talking about the concept of Bitcoin and that kind of stuff. And I think I've told you before that I have family. Most of my family is actually in Venezuela. And so I was like, hey, well, what do you think? I mean, he lives, and his family lives in a country where they have inflation of 1,000 or 1,000,000%, where they have a government, a tyrannical dictatorship, where they're not allowed to purchase things without permission. And for him, and this is exactly what he told me, he goes, all I use is Bitcoin. For him, and he used this word, it's incorruptible. The idea that he can go and make sure that that transaction was solid, was safe, it's in his account, that is manageable. And I think ultimately for our next session coming up, we want to make sure that that still remains an incorruptible way of making purchases.
That's good answer.
This is why he's the chairman of the IT caucus. I'm going to answer the question, but back to that point and what our goals are here. This is a bipartisan group up here. You've got 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. Our caucus was built that way. We believe that through education and knowledge around this space, we can help be innovators and not get in the way. And that's best done when we approach it in a bipartisan way. And we've done that for the last 2 years as we've toured and learned and made sure that we are looking at policies through that lens of how we bring more people together to have more buy-in. So no one side feels threatened by the future and by technology and what's coming forward. Back to the specific question, I've got two little kids at home. I have a 2-year-old and a 13-month-old, and the report, and we're going to dig deeper talking about how we protect their data from being monetized and how we can keep that secure, I think is very important. I had the pleasure of attending the ATX DAO reception earlier this week and learning more about how we need to make sure Texas government understands the future of business and what, how we have guidelines so people can create businesses that don't necessarily fit in the old way of model. And so looking at DAO legislation to make sure we're allowing the LLC model to work with these future businesses so everyone can be protected and be a part of it. And so I think exploring that further from the report as we look at legislation around that is something that really jumped out at me.
And what I think is a combination of all of the above, but my realization is this: we've got to figure out how to put in place these public-private partnerships. And obviously the business entity issue that was raised by the committee also, raised by the committee. When you think about the public-private partnership, what are the contours of those, and what role should the state play in incentivizing it? When I kind of look back over the history, the 30 years I've been in there in office, I've seen a lot of, I guess you could say, pilot projects where the state has incentivized some of those pilot projects to make certain that we learn from them. And so I think that we've got to look at that. We've got to incentivize those. I think we've also got to look at the individual in terms of making sure the identity issues are addressed. When you think about the issues concerning government, we got to be real careful about how we integrate crypto into our government, because we obviously don't want to overplay our hand, so to speak, but make certain that we begin to look at that, become the leader of how do we utilize cryptocurrencies in state government. How do we make certain that deed records that we use this particular technology as relates to contracts in terms of deed records, and is it efficient? I can recall when we started looking at issues concerning arbitration as a lawyer, we said it was going to be cheaper to do arbitrations. Well, hell, it's more expensive than going to trial now, okay? And so we've got to make certain that those efficiencies that we're talking about in the report actually come to pass for this particular industry and also the citizens in the state.
We brought up the events of the last 2 weeks, and if this report had been published a little bit later, we could have included some of those things. We do have an opportunity right now to at least philosophize on them somewhat. So I will ask, and it's going to be a policy position that our organization takes, that exchanges be held to a higher standard, given the events of the last couple of weeks. And two things in particular stand out. One is an exchange that operates in Texas or that has customers that are Texans should not be permitted to commingle customer funds. And second, they will need to submit to proof of reserves and proof of liabilities. And so I'm curious to know if those seem like reasonable guardrails, still light touch regulation, but also a little bit more than we currently have. So if anyone has thoughts on that topic.
I talked with over to the Texas Securities Board yesterday, the commission over there. There are about 50 investigations going on here in the state of Texas behind individuals that have just decided to come up with coins, and they're defrauding people in the state of Texas. And so the Securities Board, I asked the question, do you have the tools that you need over there? And I was told that they have the tools. Obviously, with the FTX piece, we're going to be depending upon not only the regulators, but also those that are in the industry that have the ability to have input into that decision-making process, that we put guardrails up, and that we have the ability to be flexible on those guardrails from the standpoint if we need to improve upon them, we're able to do that. We don't need to have FTX in the state of Texas.
And if I might just add something that's a little more on the philosophical side, I think what we're really talking about here is when we think about leadership. I recently was reading a Gallup report on leadership, and they kind of took a little different tack on the issue. And instead of looking at like what leaders do, which is typically what those kinds of excursions are about, it was about what is it that people follow. So what is it that people are looking for in leaders, right?
Yeah.
And they really kind of boiled it down to 4 things: trust, compassion, stability, and hope, which is interesting. And I think as we're looking at policy and leading on policy, I think those are important things for us to remember. And I think it's important for us to continue conversation with those of you who are the thought leaders in this space. Because, when we think about trust, for example, that's so linked to consumer confidence, right? Consumer confidence, consumer protections, privacy, right? All of those things are what kind of trust is built on. But we need your input to know the nuts and bolts of what those factors are. Compassion. I was thinking as I was coming down the escalator, I saw a banner, and somebody is about to get a shout out, but it said, "Can Bitcoin help prevent child abuse?" And I think those are important messages. People care about crypto and money laundering. They really do. But the message that Bitcoin can be part of fighting against a horrific tragedy like child abuse, right? That appeals to people's compassion, and they're looking for that. People are dealing in a world now where there's so much broken trust, right? Stability. And this is a place where right now crypto is right, not particularly stable. You are the ones that understand what it takes in policy to help that even out. And then finally, hope. And Gallup defines the idea of hope as tomorrow can be better than today. And I think that's what every investor is looking for, right? When they invest, they invest in hope, right? That it can be better than today. And so, I know there are lots of nuts and bolts to this that are technical that I'm looking to you so I can listen and learn and then lead effectively. But I think that this is what people are watching right now. And I think there's a real opportunity to really lead if we keep those things in mind, and we'll do it effectively.
Just to jump on, I think highlighting the 4 issues, I want to commend Julie talking this week. Earlier this week, we had the chance to talk, and the qualities that Senator Paxton just highlighted is, I think, true to how you've responded to this. How I've heard any conversation I've had respond to FTX, it has not been, I haven't heard anyone get defensive. It's been, what do we do to make sure we're not like them? What do we do to make sure this doesn't happen in Texas and the future Texans? And so
learn from it, right?
And learn from it. And it hasn't been, well, Texas can't have any regulation. This is one bad actor. It's how do we have common sense policies to protect people without stopping progress? And so you've jumped out in front of this with Texas Blockchain Council. You've proposed ideas about, raising standards. And I would just add to that, one, thank you for taking that approach and being the leader that we need the industry to be of itself. And when we think about what is going to be our role in regulating, I think the best way to make sure we don't over-regulate is for us to have trust in the industry, doing self-regulation along the way and making sure that you're not going to play defense for bad actors, but help move us all forward. And so I commend you and the Texas Blockchain Council and everyone else that I've talked to that has taken the approach that we don't want to be this, we don't want to be mixed up in this. We have to do a job with our colleagues making sure they understand the difference from one group to the next. And that can be hard, and that's part of our goal with the caucus and with us learning is to keep educating our colleagues.
And that is going to be one of the big issues because a lot of our colleagues don't know what a block is, they may be thinking it's this right here in football, they have no idea what blockchain is all about. So we're going to have to continue to educate them. Gio helped educate me on this, okay? But the fact is, they know about FTX and what happened. And so the immediate response is going to be, what are we going to do to make certain that doesn't happen in the state of Texas? And so it's going to be incumbent upon you to make certain we come up with ideas and for policy to assure the leadership in the state, as well as our colleagues, that we have thought about it, and this is what we would prescribe for the state of Texas as to make certain that we reduce the chances of something like that happening to citizens in the state and specific investors.
I think, if you think back for us all the way to November 8th during this recent election, the American people, I think, came to a very amazing conclusion. They don't want the federal government to do anything, right? They have a Senate. We have a Senate now that's split almost evenly. We have a U.S. Congress, which has to be the closest it's ever been. We have a president on one side and a Supreme Court on the other. So in that kind of environment, the power shifts to the state. And now we're in a situation where there's an industry, okay, under a magnifying glass, under the spotlight. And I think it's not just an opportunity for Texas to go and lead on this, but also effectively an obligation for us to do that for the people in this industry. Don't know Sam, never met Sam, but it's probably really bad when the person who's grading your paper says this is the worst they've ever seen, and they did, looked over Enron right before this. We have to do this. And the normal constituents who come to us who are already hesitant about this industry, already hesitant about this technology, maybe would be interested. They're used to going to a bank. They're used to going and getting something that's audited and financial. Some of them stuck their neck out to go and get involved in this, and now they may not ever again. So I think when you say, okay, it's a trading platform. Okay, so what should happen in a trading platform? Yes, 20, 30, 40%, whatever, of assets have to be behind that. And I don't want to start thinking of new things, but there are other things that happened in that fund that people probably didn't expect were being done. Like, for instance, board meetings, independent board members, audited financials, right? These are things that happen in even the smallest companies. But I think if we do that here in Texas and we go and we set a very light touch, but still reasonable, common sense, what you would expect an exchange to have, then we'll not only get that confidence back to your 4 ideas in terms of what people want, but also it turns out to probably make Texas the best place to do this kind of stuff.
It's interesting. You talked about DC sort of having, a divided house. Of course, the executive branch and the judicial branch sort of at odds on some things, and the power really shifting to the states, which means that this group right here has likely more influence over the direction of Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital assets for the United States than Senator Cruz, Senator Lummis, Senator Gillibrand from New York. I mean, in all seriousness, I think that is the case because other states are looking to Texas, to Wyoming, and maybe 1 or 2 others. And
I will say we'll probably pass 800 to 900 laws before they can rename a post office, right? I mean, we really have that ability this time. It is just too difficult for them to do it when one side has a clear majority. Right now, I don't think it's possible. But again, when it comes to this specifically, this is our opportunity with the report that came out, with your leadership, with those of you here who want to participate in this. Let's create a system in the mold that we want it to be.
So let me shift gears slightly, talk about things that we like talking about, which is jobs, tax revenue for the state, things of that nature. What is the thing that is more exciting for you personally? Is it the ethos of freedom and decentralization, or is it, hey, we're seeing a ton of job creation and maybe in some rural areas that have really needed that kind of job creation, or some tax revenue in some counties that have seen their tax revenue trend down? Which is more exciting? And you can't say both.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
I've got,
Yes, ma'am.
I've got a microphone, and I'm going to say both and.
Okay.
I really do think both of them matter. And here's why I say this. is because ideas, right? The philosophy of things, it inspires your action, right? So kids, for example, I mean, I was a teacher before I came to the Senate. Kids are inspired by things, and then they go and do them. They decide to take the computer science class. They decide to figure out how they can mine Bitcoin or crypto or whatever, right? And we take them on a field trip out to Rockdale or something like that, and show them a mining facility. And the ideas of independence and freedom and the ability to build wealth and to do it independently. I don't know that there's anything, doing something independent of other authority structures or whatever. There's nothing more appealing to a teenager than that, right? So I think it's very exciting. These ideas inspire choices of what job a kid wants to have, what kind of business they want to start, where they want to move. And all of those
works better and more efficient than most Americans want to be able to do that.
Senator, are you telling me that my 2-year-old is going to be a teenager and not want to listen to me or authority anymore? Is that what you're?
Hey, even my 2-year-old grandson's going to be a teenager someday. So yeah, get ready.
I think if we can keep this state welcome to new business and new industry, that creates jobs, that creates revenue, it creates Texas being the leader. I think of how Texas has been the leader at so many points in history, and we can do it here. We can continue to do it here, and what those jobs will mean for the kids and the next generation, and then the industry that will come behind y'all. I want us to be that innovator. So I'm most excited about, to answer the question, I'm most excited about, how it's the business leads to jobs and leads to revenue and leads to, Texas booming and continuing to boom. This is the oil boom of this generation. Mm-hmm. This is what's the forefront. And sometimes I get so frustrated with where it feels like technology, and it's probably just not understanding, seems like we're not moving forward enough because of overregulation. So what is that balance, and how do we make sure we protect Texans while sprinting forward? And so I'm excited about that aspect of it and what this industry means for the next 20 years in the state.
I'm going to go with ethos in terms of, but I think that it's connected to jobs, right? Because, the centralized banking system or the centralized monetary system we have here in the United States, I think is the biggest risk to life, liberty, and employment. If you can think about the fact that there's a group of unelected bureaucrats who basically turn a dial and say, we're going to raise interest rates and therefore cause unemployment because that's best for everybody. That's just a system that just is un-American to me in principle, right? But the idea of being able to have a distributed system that allows people the freedom and the liberty to make transactions, to make purchase, to have personal private property without having to basically have large banks or even large reserve systems involved in that. It just seems to me that that's capitalism in its finest form, and therefore the best way for us to have the best, highest paying jobs. And as a member of the budget committee, we'll take a cut of that afterwards, after everybody does it.
We'll figure out how to take a cut of it.
Yeah. Well, and these are all amazing ideas and thoughts, but the most exciting thing that I heard was Senator West saying, Angela, you're right. I want to get a clip of that, and I'm going to make it my ringtone.
You're right this time.
We'll send it back.
No, I can clip that off. You added that on.
We'll send it to your chief of staff.
Okay.
Well, as we think about Texas, it's very prosperous, and in large part due to the long history of welcoming business and promoting education and different initiatives. And we find ourselves a destination state for many jobs and many companies from around the country. And we think, we look overseas in the developing world and see there's a pretty clear use case for some of this technology in places like Venezuela or Nigeria or Vietnam, where they rely on it daily. And property rights are something that they have not enjoyed for generations. We've enjoyed those here in the United States and in Texas specifically 4 generations. It's almost like we forgot how we got here. Hernando de Soto, who's an author, Peruvian economist, wrote The Mystery of Capital. He said, the West, and particularly the United States, does not really understand how to export property rights because they've had it for so long. It's just ingrained in our culture. So there is an element that we're not as in need of this kind of technology as other places are. So it is a little surprising that Texas could jump out to a lead in this, because we do have robust property rights. We do have title insurance, and we do have these great banks that are making us very prosperous. But I'm going to give an analogy and get your reaction to this. Drayton McLean, who is a businessman in Central Texas, was talking to me one time. He was actually listening to me give a talk on this, and he said this was the most impactful thing for him. The fax machine brought about incredible innovation in the 80s, changed business processes, increased the speed of communication in business, and really increased GDP as a result. But today, when we look back at the fax machine, we think it's probably not the best way to do things, right? So I'm wondering, in 10, 20 years, will we look back at, ACH that has a 90-day clawback period and a 3-day close, and a $3 to $25 fee, depending on if it's a local or wire, international wire, as anachronistic as the fax machine? I don't know, but it's possible. So your reaction to that analogy, that maybe we're just needing to zoom out our perspective a little bit?
Let me say this. Listen to me very closely. The only thing permanent in life is change and the velocity of it, okay? That fax machine is in our back mirror right now. I can't use it anymore? Okay, Bob. All right. But the only thing permanent in life is change. And what we're talking about right now is that change that all of you will be involved in. And yes, 20 years from now, we're going to look back on these moments in history and note that we were involved in that change for the good of what we've been talking about here: individual rights, more efficiency in our economy, and creation of jobs.
Well, and just because we have, for example, with property rights, right? And we're so blessed here to have that as our strong legacy, right? That we inherited and that we can pass along. However, I think it's important to remember that freedom can be lost, and it's really easy when you grow up in a place that has a lot of freedom to think that it happens all by itself. I used to joke around that my children thought, I guess there was like a laundry fairy or something like that. They'd, get up in the morning and there were folded clothes at the end of the bed or whatever. They just thought that happened by itself until they got a little older, right? And I think that a lot of Americans kind of think there's a prosperity fairy, there's a freedom fairy or something like that, that it just happens by itself, and it doesn't. It happens because we're diligent and vigilant in protecting those rights and looking forward at how change can be part of not just continuing them, but making them more robust.
For me, when you think about productivity of a country, it's essentially the number of people working times how productive they are. That means quality of life. Productivity is a percentage of technology. So obviously improvements that we have in technology, going from fax to internet or what have you, automatically improves our quality of life. But I just think about sometimes when we talk about anachronistic, I go and have my credit card hooked up to my debit card, hooked up to my bank, and I go to buy something and it says, we're not going to let you buy that right now. And I'm like, why not? And they're like, well, we haven't seen you buy anything there before or whatever, and who knows, it may not be you. I think that is like caveman era. It really is, right? I think the expectation today for even like my kids who also believe in that same laundry fairy is I want something now, and I want it right, and I want it agreed to. And so whether it's in title, whether it's in medical records, being able to provide medical records quickly, but also confidentially, custody of evidence, for instance, like, is this picture really the picture that was taken? Is this video really from that camera?
Is this really Senator West saying, Angela, you're right?
Right, that's right. Someday there might be a very deep fake that, and it's used in a commercial. But that's the kind of stuff that I think maybe it was sci-fi for a lot of us a while ago, but it's here and now.
Well, I think at the heart of this question is, change is inevitable, change is coming. Are we going to be a state with a culture of not being afraid of change, welcoming change in all aspects of life? And are we going to try to fight to live in some yesterday that we think fondly on as if somehow it was better? I think Texas has the great potential to be the state that welcomes progress and change, unafraid of the unknown, and to move forward. And so I hope we continue to do that. I think the second part of the question was, Lee was saying to everyone here that 20 years, we're going to look back and you're all going to be old and your tech will be out of date. And we're going to wonder what your kids are doing next because we'll be moving forward. But that can happen in Texas if we continue to welcome you so your next generation can do the same. And we have to be unafraid. And I think this industry goes at the heart of that because people are scared of the unknown. And so we need lawmakers in the state that are willing to embrace the unknown and move forward.
And let me say this. You've got to understand that we have Democrats and Republicans up here. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. And so you have persons in the legislature that are well thought of here. And we are here on Friday afternoon.
I'll fix that next year.
Because we want this to occur. But the only way for it to occur is to make certain that you get involved in this process. And when you're called upon by Lee to come down and testify and do whatever needs to be done, that you actually show up. Because again, this will be a bipartisan effort to make certain we move forward by leap years, okay?
The process is important. Showing up is important. I'm sure everyone in this room is thinking, you all know more than we're pretending to know up here. And we know more than our colleagues. And so that's how much your role with educating your state rep, your senator, is going to be vital when we try to do policy moving forward. And so it's a very active engagement with the process. It doesn't stop at the ballot box. It doesn't stop with hearing us saying this today. It's talking to all of us and helping us understand, what did you say? There's already been hundreds of bills filed. Mm-hmm. I think in my first session, it took 1,200 votes on the House floor. I work in youth sports and was a former county party chair, so I'd worked in elections. I mean, these were the two things you bring with your hat, and then you have to vote on everything. So we rely on industry and specialists, and you have to be an active, engaged partner in the legislative process for us to be effective. And so, yes, when Lee asked you to come, try to answer that call or call your senator and state rep, because our 5% of knowledge is more than our colleagues, so we need your help.
How many of you are from North Texas?
Virginia.
North Texas?
I am.
Well, you have 3 legislators from North Texas here, okay? So make certain that you get in our ear and be a part of what we're trying to do for you, okay?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking these elected officials for being with us today. Thank you, guys.
Good to see you.
I'm Lee Bratcher, the president of the Texas Blockchain Council. Thank you to everyone who came out to this year's summit, helping us make it the best one yet. Now more than ever, we need professional industry associations like the TBC to help craft effective policy instead of the CEOs of centralized exchanges roaming the halls of various state capitals or in DC. Texas is quickly becoming the center of the universe for Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital assets. If you want to be part of the future that we are crafting here in Texas, join the TBC today.